All right, welcome everyone to the October 19, 2022 meeting of the Cohasset Planning Board. We'll start with a roll call attendance. Clark
Brewer here.
Tom Callahan here.
Me Glassmeyer here.
Kevin Hine here.
Deirdre Hobson here.
Chris Plex here.
Thank you. Lauren, could you explain to the public how they can participate this evening?
Certainly. Thank you. For members of the public wishing to speak on a particular item, we have a dedicated time that we take public comment for each item on the agenda. Typically, we do ask that you use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. You can insert your name and address and written comment, or just that you'd like to speak to an item, at which time we will promote you to attendees and you can use your microphone and camera to address the board. Thank you. I'll turn it back to the chair.
All right, thank you, Lauren. All right, so the first two items on the agenda are sort of lumped together as they both deal with the Situate Hill site. So one part of this is releasing a bond from the subdivision application of many years ago. And then there's a discussion about extension one of the site plan approvals. And this is what's confusing me. It's from the one last year, not from 2021, not the one we just did. So I am thoroughly confused about all these requests, and I am going to turn it over to Lauren and Carolyn on our side and Attorney Walter Sullivan on the other side to explain all of this and what it is the board needs to vote on. So you have the floor.
Thank you. I will start and then I'm going to turn it to Carolyn and I'll promote everybody on the other side. So just quickly in terms of process and application, there's been a lot of confusion this week. But to make a long story short, you have the first item on the agenda is a bond release because of the Situate Hills subdivision, the commercial subdivision that occurred circa 2006. It carved out several lots. There was a development of the self-storage building at the base of that subdivision. And then there's the original owner that maintained the original parcels. Now, the site plan review applications that you have had have not been the owner of the land in each instance. They have been applicants interested in a contingent sale upon the land. So now that we have an applicant who has received site plan approval and is moving forward with the development, they now are interested in taking over the remaining requirement for the subdivision that was to complete the roadway. So again, Carolyn will get into this all in more detail, but it really is to release this previous tri-party agreement that was the self-storage organization, the owners of the back lots and the town from the tri-party agreement from the previous subdivision for the roadway completion, to release it and then assign it over to the current applicant who's going to take on responsibility, who is the 2022 Rosano Davis company who did the 2022 site plan review. On a parallel track and totally coincidental, the Mark Trider, who is the applicant of the 2021 site plan review that you approved for an office park development for the same site, reached out to request an extension of his site plan review approval. The reason being is that they typically last for a year since filing. It was filed November 10th, I want to say, of 2021. So he reached out for an extension for 1 year. I'm not entirely certain what the rationale was, but then he also circled back today, not realizing what was going on in the other parallel track, and said, you know what, I've actually like to rescind this request. I no longer need you to continue it. So the second item on the agenda, you can just take no action. There's no longer a request to extend that site plan review approval. You can really just focus on item number one. And I hope that clarifies some confusion.
Yeah, that applicant is out of the picture, I assume completely, that they're not purchasing the property. I assume, but all right. And then the other thing I saw in an email today, we can discuss, and I hope maybe we can address, was some issue about a traffic light at 3A and the efforts by the current owner to get a traffic light, and then the way we dealt with it in our 2022 site plan approval. So maybe we can touch on that. But Carolyn, if you could explain all of what's going on here, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. And I don't know if Catherine McGar is out there and has joined us or has been elevated to panelist. As she has prepared most of these documents, but Lauren kind of gave you the lay of the land, so to speak, but this began as a 6-lot subdivision and then was subsequently amended in 2016 to a 5-lot subdivision. At that same time, the lot 1A, which is where the self-storage facility is currently, there was a new covenant that went into place, as well as a tri-party agreement, so that Crocker 2 Realty, the owner of the entire subdivision, would sell parcel 1A to SSG Cushing LLC to do the self-storage facility, and the obligation to then complete all of the roadway work under the subdivision plan passed to SSG, but there was also a bond that was put up by Crocker 2 as a result of that. SSG was released from the covenant. I think that was in 2016. And now Crocker 2, as you've seen from Paul Davis and Rosano, they've come in for that trade service bay site plan approval that you entertained just a few months ago. They want to buy parcels 2A, 3A, and 4A of that subdivision. So Crocker 2 is going to sell to them, and in so transferring the property, we need to release Crocker 2 from the covenant and the tri-party agreement requiring the roadway improvements to be done. What also needs to happen is that Paul Davis Rosano, whatever the entity is that acquires title to parcels 2A, 3A, and 4A, needs to produce a new form of surety to us for the remainder of the work. And my understanding is that they have been in touch with the DPW director. They arrived at an amount on the bond, and that they're in the process of trying to secure a bond and surety. We also discovered a funny little thing happened, I guess, in 2016 when the subdivision was revised. What is known as Lot 5A, there was a small portion of Lot 5A that runs all the way up to the back of the property along the side of Lot 4A. And the purpose, as best as we can tell, was as lot lines were being adjusted, it would that Lot 5A, which wasn't part of the original subdivision, would have lost the lot area that it required in order to stay a conforming lot. So we're also asking for a portion of that Lot 5A that extends back to the rear property line to be released from the covenant. And hopefully that's, hopefully it gives you a sense of what's going on. As we know, I see Attorney McGar is there, and I don't know if there's anyone else that might want to answer any questions you might have about the whole transaction.
Okay. And Attorney McGar, you represent the Crocker 2?
Crocker 2, yes, the sellers of lot 2.
And Lynn is one of the principals from Crocker 2, I know that. Walter, Attorney Sullivan, why are you here? Who are you in this mess?
Oh, I represent, of course, the applicant, Paul Davis, and I'm here really, I'm really here, Mr. Chair, because I have nothing else to do.
Okay. All right, well, that's fine. Well, Attorney McGar or Ms. Schwant or Mr. Davis, Attorney Sullivan, if any of you have anything to add, now would be the time to add it.
No, I think Carolyn did a good job. In 2016, when Lot 1A was sold, the owners wanted to be released from the covenant, and so that was the result of the tri-party agreement, where my clients put up cash funds in the amount of about $440,000, and then also a bond in the amount of $210,000, and they pretty much have expended all of the cash, with the exception of, I think, a little less than $2,000 in doing the improvements that were required. So that's and now that they're selling the property, it doesn't make sense for them to continue to have the obligation to complete the roadway. And so Paul Davis, who is the buyer under Crocker and Nantasket LLC, I believe. He has agreed to take on the obligation. And as Carolyn said, he's been working with the town engineer on the bond.
Okay, obviously your bond can't be released until the new one's in place. I could assume that everybody's approaching this in that way.
If I may, Mr. Chair, so I guess we weren't, yeah, so we obviously understand that Mr. Davis will step into the shoes as it relates to the roadway. He's prepared to get the bond. We weren't really aware that there was any type of tripartite agreement, and I'm not clear, is that going to be amended or revised, or is that just going to be just dissolved?
Our plan was to terminate that. I had drafted a termination, and then Paul was to enter into a new agreement with the town.
Have you seen all the paperwork on this, Carolyn?
I have, yes.
Including a new agreement with Mr. Davis's entity?
No, that I have not seen yet, and I don't know what form of surety Mr. Davis may actually choose. As far as the timing, it would have been ideal to have had the new bond ready to go at the time that we're also asking to release the other two. Unfortunately, the sale of this property, I guess, has already been delayed once. So one suggestion was that we could agree to execute to release the covenant in the tri-party agreement, and we could hold that in escrow until such time as we receive the new surety from Mr. Davis. The other thought is that there are still some protections in place for the board as far as, Mr. Davis can't get, an occupancy permit until the roadway is completed. And from what I understand, most of what just needs to be done here is the final course of the roadway, which would likely be something that they would wait until the end of the project anyway, after all the construction vehicles are done going up and down the hill. So that's another option for the board to make sure that this gets done.
If I may, Attorney Murray, my client has the bond in hand for, I think it's 215,000. I think he anticipated that. And it's obviously limited to the roadway and the conditions that you talk about.
Okay.
Going back to my comment, I would be more in favor of the escrow issue, of just making sure that everything is in place before we release one. And we certainly can vote tonight to do it, to do the release, but it's, be held in escrow until we know, we see this bond that Walter's just told us about. And if there needs to be some new agreement to replace this tri-party agreement, then that should be done too, I would assume, before this transaction closes and before we officially release Crocker 2.
If I could add that I really think that the purpose of the original tri-party agreement was to release Lot 1A from the covenant. In this case, the covenant is still applicable to the lots that Paul is buying. So I'm not quite sure if an agreement is necessary, because there's nothing being released this time. I'll pose that.
Yeah, no, Carolyn, I'll defer to you on that, since you have much more knowledge of what these documents say than the rest of us do.
Right, and obviously, I'd like to see the new bond, but if it is simply a bond, and I know $215,000 was the estimate that the DPW director provided. So I think upon receipt of that and an opportunity to review it, I would agree. I don't see a need for a new tri-party agreement.
Okay, so would you mind framing a motion that you need from us?
So perhaps I could first ask Attorney Sullivan a question. If your client has the bond in hand, when do you think we could receive it?
I think we could deliver that in the morning to Town Hall, correct, Paul?
Yes,
Okay,
correct.
okay. So then I think an appropriate motion would be that the board vote to release the 2016 subdivision covenant and tri-party agreement. And I think it should be subject to receipt of the new bond from the prospective buyer and review by council to ensure that it's adequate.
Well, I'll make that an official motion by a member of the board. Exactly that. I won't repeat it, but anyone like to
So
second
moved.
that? Second, anyone?
Second.
Clark, are you seconding it?
I just said so moved. If she
all
crafted
right.
the
Yeah,
motion
that's
as a
fine.
member making the motion, and then somebody else would second it.
All right.
Second.
Drew, were you going to jump in second?
Second.
All right, thank you. All right, so any further discussion that anyone needs or understanding of what we're doing here? All right, then take a alphabetical roll call. Clark,
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye.
Kevin, you're muted. All right, Kevin's.
Kevin Heine, aye.
Thank you.
Deirdre Hobson, aye.
Chris Plex, aye.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you all for explaining that. And good luck with the project. And I guess there's no issue regarding the traffic light. As I understood the email I saw about that originally it was required to get a traffic light there, and that the state has turned it down at least twice. And in the more recent permutations of our permits, we have suggested working cooperatively with the state DOT, whatever it's called now, MassDOT, and to try to get a light, but where it's no longer a mandate. Is that a correct assumption of where we stand today?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, the only thing I would add to that was that the original requirement was that the applicant use best efforts to try to get a traffic control signal approved by Mass Highway. And you're correct. I believe that at least the applicant's attorney has represented that they tried at least twice and each time was denied. And you're right, in more recent permitting, that language has been softened to an encouragement.
Okay. All right. And you are so encouraged, Mr. Davis. Keep trying. All right, thank you all. Unless there's anything else, we'll conclude this and move on to the next item.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
A lot of billable hours for that. I like to see it. All right, so our next item on the agenda is continuing our hearing on 534 Beechwood and 32 Dome Street. So who do we have here this evening for that?
So I have, let's see, hold on. Brendan Sullivan here is, I just promoted Lily Sestito, and I believe we have Rich Henderson as well.
Okay. And Lauren, can you just summarize where we left off the last time with this?
Yes, so the board was reviewing a site plan review application, as well as originally it was filed for a land alteration special permit. It's since been proven that they don't need that portion. I would recommend just to close out your file that you make a vote as such, finding that it's not necessary, because we did receive that file and advertise originally for a land alteration special permit. And then the site plan review conversation last time, at least one of the members had asked the applicant to refine and take a look at another traffic configuration pattern for the parking lot. They did submit material on that, and they're here to discuss it tonight.
Okay. Let's get the special permit out of the way. Can I have a motion that we close the special permit part of this hearing on the grounds that we do not feel that the bylaw is implicated in this project, and such, so the special permit isn't needed?
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second,
All right. Roll call vote. Clark,
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye.
Kevin, you're muted again. Thumbs up, Kevin.
Kevin Heine, aye. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's all right.
Deirdre Hobson, aye.
Chris Plex, aye.
All right, thank you. All right, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Sullivan. If you want it, we'll go back to the site plan part of the application and the discussion about ingress and egress in the parking lot.
Sure, thank you. Brendan Sullivan with Cameron Consulting, merging currently with Merrill Engineers and Land Surveyors. Hopefully you can see the plan I just put up in front of you. Basically the same site plan we had before, although in red, I did highlight what a new exit entrance would look like on Church Street with the grades out there. So coming in off of Church Street, as I mentioned before, Church Street does come up pretty steep as you come south from Beechwood Street. Come up to a high point probably around in here somewhere, probably just below elevation 80. The grade where the parking lot would come out would be at about elevation 77. And grading that back onto the site, even going, I went at about a 6.25%, which is about 16 feet between every foot contour. As you can see, the grades that we end up in the sidewalk adjacent to the building are 1.5 feet above at the worst point on this corner, approximately about 1.5 feet above where we wanted to be. Elevation 75 we come up with, which the elevation of the structure itself is 74. So the sidewalk would be 1 foot above the first floor elevation, which really doesn't work there. Typically you have your first floor, 1 foot above top of foundation, and your top of foundation is typically about 1 foot above the adjacent grade. So really you want the adjacent grade here to be about 70, 73. And this would be 2 feet above that. So we had originally looked at this entrance exit option initially, and I actually even did start grading it out. And I remember this is when John Cavanaro was involved with the project, and I said, John, this grade isn't going to work out here. And he said, well, that's no longer going to be an option on Church Street. We really want to stay focused on Doane Street. So that's kind of how the project progressed. So in the letter I mentioned as well is that it would create someone exiting here, looking to the south. You'd be looking uphill. I don't know if you get your eyesight over that hill or not. So it could create a blind sight distance in that direction. I think with that, I don't know if Lily has any, I know she had maybe an opinion about the entrance and exit on Church Street as well.
I unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Can hear you.
Well, originally we always wanted to have it come out on Doane Street. I think Doane Street is used to the traffic, and I don't think Joe and I really wanted to put any extra traffic out onto Church Street where it is definitely more residential. I think the neighbors would appreciate it if we kept it going out the way it was originally planned. And also I think the grade in the flow would be much better coming back out onto Doane Street as it was always originally planned to do.
Okay. Anything else, Brendan, you want to add before I open it up to the board?
I don't think so. I can answer any questions that anybody has.
Okay. All right. Take some of the board's comments and mixing it up. Kevin, since you brought up this issue last time, I'll let you take the start tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate the applicants look at this, and I appreciate the grade difference, which sounds like it's 1 foot over on that southern edge. Given the people that they have working on the project, I don't think anything like that would be insurmountable from a design engineering standpoint to provide access in and out of Church Street. My point being, if access is going to be solely controlled on Doane Street, and that's going to be the primary focus of pedestrian traffic as well, because of the ball fields across the way, because of parking across the way, because of parks across Doane Street. There's going to be a lot of activity on Doane Street. in addition to the existing activity on Doan Street as a means to get in and out of town. If this creates an issue, people will quickly find an alternative is to go straight on Beechwood and turn left on the Church Street if they were heading out of town in a southerly direction. If the applicants feel confident this is something that's insurmountable, given the engineering here, I guess I would like to hear whether a traffic study is going to be required now or later, because I think eventually this could be an issue. 2 points to that. This is going to be a successful business. I know the applicants know how to run a successful business, and they do operate a successful business in other parts of town, and they are heavily trafficked. This will be too. I'm sensitive to the needs and interests of people that live on Church Street. And I think that those need to be heeded, and the applicant makes reference to them. And I think that's good. I don't want this to become an issue down the road based on what we do tonight and what we're hearing tonight, unless there's something that can be done now to mitigate that.
Okay, anything else?
No.
Okay, thanks. Deirdre?
No comments tonight.
Okay, Chris?
Anyways.
Nothing to add. I do appreciate the additional analysis. That's all I have.
Okay. Clark?
No, I don't have anything to add on the access issue. Like it seems to me what the applicant has put together for access onto and into the site from Doan Street is adequate for this type of business and or mixed use project. So I don't have any comments, nor would I encourage an additional access point from Church Street.
For my comments, Kevin, I appreciate what you're saying, but I having lived there and go this way all the time, I think that, the major, I realize people go throughout the day through this intersection, but the real heavy use is the morning and evening rush hour. And that's where I don't necessarily see that there would be a big conflict with the traffic here. I can't foresee myself as a regular user of this intersection going around to Church Street to avoid it. I just don't see that happening. So, I'm in favor of this as proposed. I really have nothing more to add beyond that. I don't think it's going to be as much of a problem. I don't know, if it proves to be a problem, I don't know, Carolyn, what can we do if it proves to be a problem in the future? With the Atlantica project, we're doing a future traffic study because it's a completely change of use and there's really no data to start from. And, I don't know if that's appropriate that we give the board the option to do that in the future, but, what would happen if we didn't think this was working as designed? And it became the problem that Kevin foresees.
Tom, one thing that I think is relevant is that there are stop signs on all sides turning to go south down Doan Street. And to go east on Beechwood, so that traffic is essentially stopped at the ingress and egress locations, as opposed to all of our experience 3A with JJ's, with cars going by at 50 miles an hour and trying to make sure the little kids don't try and wiggle out of our firm hand grip.
No, I appreciate that. That's why I don't think it'll be a major problem.
From a safety perspective, it's a slow traffic location.
Yeah. All right. Amy?
I guess I'm more inclined to be cautious in light of the multiple uses, in light of the condition of Church Street, which creates additional constraints, that we require that there be a traffic study. I mean, we do it for the purpose of the safety of the public. And it is much better to understand what's going to potentially occur than to say, I wish we had known it in advance. And so it's a site that I suspect hasn't been studied in detail with all of the changes that take place over the course of a year. And so we're not dealing with a situation of, Tom says it's a morning situation, but there's 365 days of a year. And there is 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock at night, and that's 365. So I would say that for the safety of the public, for the assurance of the owner of the property that no one is harmed, and also to really decide strategically whether or not a four-way stop is the right thing to do. You might need a light, who knows? So I would actually align myself with Kevin's argument that it's better to do it now than to be disappointed that we should have done it and we didn't.
Well, all right, well, we'll bring this to a head in a moment, but Carolyn, if you might indulge us as to what we might do, what we would be free to do in the future should things completely go south. If anything, once we issue a permit.
So one of the things the board has to look at under site plan review, obviously, is, safe vehicular and pedestrian traffic. So it's within your purview to look at this, whether it's now or whether you decide to do this at a future date. You could issue a site plan approval with conditions. And you could, similar to what the zoning board did, you mentioned the Atlantica project, Mr. Chairman. I mean, that was a special permit where we're quite accustomed to conditions. So you could impose a condition as part of the site plan approval that would require this project to come back. Picking some sort of a defined date, say 6 months or 1 year following the final certificate of occupancy being issued, something like that, so that you've actually start to see some use of the site and see how traffic flows into and out of it and how that affects the streets. You could do that.
Okay.
Or like I said, you could pause right now and you could look at it now.
Right. Okay.
Lily, can I add something else?
Yeah, could I just ask Lily a question? Lily, you'll be operating this year round?
Yes, it will be year round.
And will you be operating during morning and evening rush hours? I assume at least one of them.
Not the JJ's part of it. I mean, JJ's will be open probably not till after lunch. We probably won't be opened, that early. I'm thinking more when the kids are out of school type of thing. The general store will be, normal, probably, I don't know, 6 a.m. to maybe 6 p.m. Yeah.
Okay.
Something like that.
All right. Yeah, Kevin. Thank you, Lily.
I would just add too, I think it behooves the applicant to look at these issues now before they do contemplate substantial revisions to the facility, to the building, to the structure, to the future structure that could be incorporated into a site design that allows egress onto Church Street versus moving forward with a site design now that's at a specific grade and then finding out they need to do something to mitigate an issue based on what happens on Doan Street down the road. I think it behooves us to require the traffic study be now. And I think it would also be in the best interest of the applicant to consider doing that now so that anything that would need to be changed could be incorporated into the site design as opposed to be done after something has already been designed and built. I'll leave it at that.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Anybody else on the board? You can take the share screen off if you could, Mr. Sullivan. Appreciate it. That way you get to see everybody. Richard, is Henderson, Attorney Henderson, anything you want to add or include here? Rich. He's muted. He's muted and we can't see him.
I'm unmuted. We've already adjusted the design the sidewalks, the crosswalks, the curbing, 2 or 3 different times to accommodate suggestions. I personally have met with Brian Joyce twice, just at September 1st. I think every thought has been given to what's an appropriate traffic and safety pattern. And this isn't willy-nilly. This is a very thoughtful project. I think maybe Brendan's done 4 or 5 different drafts, and each one has been done at the request of someone involved in safety and traffic to make it a meaningful and useful changes to the plan. I don't think any further changes are either dictated or required or are necessary. It's been given a lot of thought, including by town officials, including the town engineer. I personally, as I said, met with Brian twice, once at the site and once in his office with the plans just in September 1st. Right. And so I really don't think any further traffic study or change in egress or access makes any sense whatsoever at this point. It's not like it wasn't thoughtfully drafted, prepared, considered, and reviewed by town officials.
Lauren, before we bring this to a head, do you have anything to add or comments about this?
I will just confirm that I've heard from Brian Joyce, who has reviewed the project. He's been in agreement with the, the way in which it meets up with the right of way and the sidewalking. I would just remind the board that you have the purview, of course, to look at traffic and circulation under site plan review. Not every site plan review that in the history, that historically the board doesn't always require a traffic count, a genuine traffic study. It is a big expense to an applicant and it requires a peer review. So it is something to consider. That's why typically some of our sort of smaller projects that you see come in, even an example I can give you in recent history was 807 Chief Justice Cushing Highway. It's sort of a smaller site footprint, and through sort of generic traffic information about the kind of use they were doing, they were able to supplement that information and explain that. So I just want the board to consider that, that this is, the applicant has been before us for many months at this point, and that typically if we were to ask them to do a thing like a traffic study, it would have been early on in the process. That way they've already done a couple of iterations of traffic study and time on this. So I just want to frame those things. There's really no hard or fast rule on it's the board's purview on a traffic study for a site plan review, but I just do want to let you know that that's how you've handled it. I also want to say another recent site plan review that you did without a formal traffic study was 46 Border Street. So just for comparative purposes, I'll leave you with those thoughts.
Right. For 46 Border, we were following the zoning board's lead on that. And again, I think that's a good analogy too, because it's a site that has no, it even has some prior history, but not a prior history with the kind of multiple uses it's going to have. And so, we're looking toward a future traffic study if it becomes a problem. And personally, I don't see this as becoming a problem. I think this is a small enough use that I don't think it's going to make a major impact. But, Amy, is your hand up from before, or you have anything else? No? Okay. All right. Well, so I'll entertain a motion from the board, and I think our choices right now are to approve it. We may have some conditions and little things about the sidewalks and the crosswalks, but we're really looking at a choice of approving it now as is, or approving it with possibly with a traffic study now, or I mean, well, actually not approving anything, keeping the hearing open for a traffic study, or approving it with the condition of the possibility, if the board feels it's necessary, for a future traffic study after, I don't know. I would suggest a year of use so we see its year-round impacts. I think it's going to be a much different site in the summertime when the fields are being used and as compared to when they're not being used. But so I'll entertain a motion from anyone on the board who'd like to make one.
I could just ask
Who's first? Ladies first, Amy, go ahead.
Well, I defer to Kevin.
I just wanted some clarification. Wasn't there also an issue with regard to the use of this multi-use of this property as residential space? Is that tied into the approval and the voting that we're doing here now?
It's a mixed-use project with 2 apartments
So
and retail space.
Okay, thank you, Clark, for that clarification. I thought one of the questions that was before the board was whether any of those multi-use apartment spaces we're going to be provided a low-income housing allotment for the town. And I don't think we ever got clarification on that as a board from the applicant.
Rich, you want to answer that? Or, well, Lauren,
I don't-
no, let Lauren jump in. I saw her hand jump up real quick. So.
So our inclusionary zoning requirements for any residential development in town is triggered when you have 5 or more residential units. So this project does not require inclusionary zoning because it's only 2 residential units.
Duly noted. There's a number of places that'll come in front of this board that don't require it. But will this still have a unit that provides us or provides the town credit towards that? And I think that's a yes or no answer to the applicant. That the board should know.
No.
That's correct.
Tom, Mr. Fleck would like to make a
Yeah.
comment?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Just seeking clarity, if we were to make a traffic study a year after the completion of construction, a condition of our approval, what then would our authority be to ask for changes if the traffic study turned up something problematic?
Carolyn, you want to answer that? I can answer it, but you can answer it.
We'd have to add some language in similar to what we've done with other permits, where if the traffic study reveals that there are problems and that any kind of modifications are required to the site plan, that the applicant returns to modify the site plan to address those issues.
Mhm. And you know, my thinking at the moment is not even to mandate it in a year. Leave the option open that if we think it's necessary, but I'm not sure we would need to mandate it because I'm fairly confident it won't be necessary, but that's just my opinion. But anyway, so a motion from somebody. Anyone like to make a motion? I'll do it if no one wants to.
I'll make a motion that we require after 24 months post-project completion that there be a return to a discussion of the planning board regarding the feasibility and or the need of a traffic study. Because I think 1 year is really, it's too small of a statistical circumstance to be able to make a generalization.
Mr. Chairman, does that motion need to be filled out a little bit more in terms of approval of the project as designed?
I assume we would be granting site plan review. We would be granting the permit under site plan review with the appropriate findings, but subject to a condition of a required review of traffic 2 years after occupancy. Would that be correct, Amy? To
That's correct.
flesh it out, okay.
And who would provide that traffic study? Is there clarification on that?
Well, it would be on the applicant.
By the applicant or by a third party?
No, well, the applicant's going to hire, you know, if that was required and it had to be done, the applicant would be hiring somebody else to do it, but it's the applicant's responsibility as it is in any other kind of.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
And all right, so does anybody second that?
I
One
will
more
second
question,
that.
I apologize. If I could clarify whether the motion would give the board the option to require a traffic
Well,
study.
That's my objection to the motion is it's a requirement where I would make it optional. At the board's discretion if it feels necessary. But that would be my modification of that.
Do you want to make that modification to the motion?
Yeah, I will if, you know, Amy allows me to do that, that's fine. I would make the modification that it'd be 2 years out and it would be optional on the board if it feels that it's necessary.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is essentially what you're saying, Tom, that that there be a time in the future that we actually return to this with the expectation that we review it to the point where we determine that indeed 2 years previously it was not necessary and we do not need to act on it therefore. But I think that if you leave it without any sort of dimension beyond that, you're basically saying we won't talk about it. I think we have to have a specific time in,
All right, no, that's fine. I just don't want to require it to be done when circumstances may prove it's not necessary to be done. That's all.
well, that's, yeah, I mean, that's the
Right,
point,
so
is
it's-
that we have to have a time to determine if there is a need for a study. If so, then the applicant would be required to conduct the study.
All right.
So it requires us, Tom, it requires us to review this 24 months out and based on our own personal information at the time to determine whether a traffic study is necessary or not. That's my understanding. Okay.
Well, I'm assuming we could also take community input. It wouldn't just be our personal
Absolutely.
experience. Okay.
And there might be, and for all we know, there might be lots of accident data by that time. Who knows? But I just don't want to mandate something upon them that might end up not being necessary at all. But the detail, you know, the devil is going to be in the details of how we write this condition. And Attorney Henderson, you're certainly free to suggest any language towards that condition if you'd like. So, yeah,
As
go
long
ahead.
as long as it's optional and not mandatory, I'm fine, however you couch it.
Okay, all right, well, again, that's the understanding as I see it right now, and again, I'm inviting you, if you want to suggest language, feel free. Okay, so with that understanding, do we have a second to the motion?
Can Amy restate it or how?
The motion is 24 months out after the completion of the construction in total. A lot of the times projects drag on and they're not finished. Completion, that we return to this question and review the results of 24 months post-construction of the traffic situation, public comment, to determine whether or not a traffic study is required.
And the further expansion of it is that we are granting site plan review. We are making the findings that 12.6B and its various conditions have been satisfied with the condition that we are leaving open the possibility of reviewing the traffic issue 2 years hence after issuance of an occupancy permit. So we will see this in writing at our next meeting, which is what, the 2nd, and you know, we'll go over this again, but that's the gist of the motion. We are approving the project with that condition. So,
Ms. Hobson has something to say.
Yeah, right. As long as we are clear that it's occupancy, because we won't have any evidence unless it's in operation for
Yeah.
the 2 years.
Yeah.
Things are going well. Okay, just checking.
and frankly, we might use what the zoning board condition, the 46 Border Street project might be the perfect language for us. So we'll take a look at that. But all right. So with that motion, did we get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Clark. Any further discussion? So I see 2 attendees. Is there anybody out there in the public who has anything to add to this? Now would be the time. Okay, seeing nothing. I think they're here for the next project. Take a roll call vote.
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Glassmeyer, aye.
Kevin Heine, aye.
Deirdre Hobson, I.
Chris Klex, aye.
All right, thank you. That motion's adopted. So we'll get the decision with that condition as quickly as we can to you.
Great, thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you all. Thank you, Lily and Joe. Good luck with it. And make sure
Thank you very
that-
much.
Yeah, make sure there's sugar-free ice cream for sale.
You got it. Plenty. Thank you.
All right, so
Thanks again.
thank you. Move through that. Our last scheduled item is 55 South Main Street. Not sure we're going to go deep into this because a number of things haven't happened. Lauren, if you could explain where we are with this.
Certainly. So to make a long story short, we are not as advanced as we thought we would be in terms of receiving material for the meeting tonight. So we are going to continue a large portion of our conversation about this application at our next meeting on November 2nd. The applicant will review their new material. We'll have information from the peer reviewer at that point. And we hope to have some more information about affordable housing, which leads to the next topic really, which is a question for all of you. I'll give you some background that the applicant went to the Affordable Housing Steering Committee just for a sort of a recommendation discussion. This has been a practice that we have advised all applicants who are required to do inclusionary zoning requirements to just sort of vet out their ideas as they're sort of crafting their proposal for a recommendation. At the end of the day, the Affordable Housing Steering Committee is advisory at most, and they have no bearing on what the planning board chooses to do with their permit authority over inclusionary zoning requirements. With that said, there was really no concrete proposal given by the applicant at that time. It was just more of a concept discussion, and nothing has really been decided. The question I have for all of you is, what would you be looking for in a deliverable for your affordable housing information for this second? That is what the applicant asked us to, so that they could know what to prepare to respond. So I wanted to pitch it to all of you to see if you had any particular questions that you wanted to have answered or items that you were looking for.
All right. This came up this morning, and I, I had written down my thoughts. I didn't circulate them, but my view from the beginning about this, with this and other projects, I think, well, first of all, this particular applicant, I think, we've run into a situation where he's relied on the building inspector and thinking we're guided by that, and I hope is not into a situation where they think if the Affordable Housing Committee gives a recommendation that we need to accept it. We're the final decision maker on this subject. My own view is that a payment in lieu is useless. I don't know where we are. I know where we are from the 2010 census with our 40B count. The 2020 census isn't finished. We're close. Maybe we're in compliance. Maybe we're close to not being, but it's close one way or the other. But we go into this cycle every 10 years, and the majority of our housing stock that's added to the denominator of our total housing stock is single family homes, which have no affordable housing component. This project, 2 units, no affordable housing component. And by the way, Kevin, thank you for bringing it up, because it might be something as we redo the bylaw that we might want to rethink about our inclusionary zoning requirement. So, it's important that the reason that was put in was to keep us, trying to keep to the 10% criteria by new project comes on with a lot of units, that at least 10% of them be affordable. And so given how most of our development is single family, I think we have to grab these opportunities when we can. And so I'm a giant advocate of either they do it on site or they provide actual units somewhere else in the community. But I prefer the on-site here because the village bylaw, when passed mixed use, it was designed to create smaller units, more affordable units, whether it's 40B affordable or the Cohasset concept of affordable. And I think it defeats the purpose if we don't let that happen. And I understand there's economics involved, but we have, what was One Pleasant? Is it 14 units or 18 units? What did it end with? Anyway, it's 14 or 18 units, and we're getting 14, and we're getting, there voluntarily 25% of them are affordable. The economics are working at that site. So
And all of them count towards the SHI.
yeah, and that's another
Because they're
decision.
rental.
This applicant needs to make a decision real soon too, is not only how they're going to do affordables on site, and I think they should, but whether these are going to be condos or rentals. And I think for the benefit of 40B, our preference is rentals. And I think that, the underlying concept behind the changes to the village bylaw made a long time ago was for rentals and having these kinds of housing options available to us. So that's my opinion. I think they got to be told to do it on site. So, yes, Laura.
I just want to clarify the caveat about rentals versus home ownership for affordable housing. You only get that full count for all of the units if you have 25% of the total unit count deed restricted. So our inclusionary zoning only requires 10%.
Yeah.
Even if they did rentals and did them on site, we're not going to get all 12 units counted on the SHI because it doesn't meet that 25% threshold. So there's a distinction there, and that the One Pleasant Street applicant was just voluntarily going above and beyond their requirement. That's not what our requirement is. So I just want to make that distinction.
Okay, no, thank you
you.
thank you for clarifying that. And then our inclusionary zoning bylaw is a different animal than the state requirements. Thank you.
You know,
So that's
I'm
my
open-
thought. Let me go back to I'm sorry, I jumped on, I ruined my own alphabetical rotation, but Kevin started the last one, so I'll start with Deirdre on this one.
You're muted.
Okay,
Deidre.
You're
there
muted.
you go. Sorry. I think I echo much of Tom's thoughts. And I do agree that we need to focus on, it is the village. That would be a great place to have affordable housing. I do understand what Lauren's saying about the rental piece. I do completely agree that a financial payment in lieu of an actual structure is not okay. We need to address it much more directly in town and have actual units. So I do feel strongly, I do understand as a developer, the financial implications of that, and you don't get the biggest bang for your buck when you're doing that, but there is an inherent desire to keep this community a strong, supportive community, one that accepts and actually creates homes for people who need affordable housing. So we want to be very cautious, as I have always said, that we not become exclusionary of everybody that can't afford to live in Cohasset. And the village is a nice spot for people to be able to walk to places, especially now with the new little market across the street. And you can walk to school. So I echo those comments that Tom made about the affordable housing piece. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, Chris?
I agree. We should grab them when it makes sense to. My sensitivity is that if we fall behind, it turns into a problem with anything that comes up. So we could end up putting them where they don't make sense. So I agree, we should be opportunistic as these things do come up. It puts us in a much better position to do it in a way that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Clark?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm open to whether it's rental or for sale condos, and whether the units, the affordable inclusionary units, which is a 10%, which would be 2 units because the apartment count is 12.
Yep.
Because they'd have to round up.
I have to round up, yeah.
I mean, ideally, they would be a part of the project and it would, but I'm open to them being offsite, especially if, you know, there was 3 affordable units were made, or let's say a 4-unit affordable project was built offsite and all of them were rental and they all counted. That might be a situation where this developer works with another developer to increase their count, so that like what happened at 1 Pleasant Street, where the 10% was required, but they did 25% and they did rentals so that all the units would. So it's sort of a numbers game. I think whatever is the most advantageous for contributing to the SHI is, I think, up for the developer to try to strategize for the town and for the planning board in their special permit site plan application. But and I would say I'm open to them doing the best work that they can to increase the count above the minimum 2 required. I will say anecdotally, 5 years ago, when we changed the inclusionary zoning bylaw, the village was excluded completely. And so I think it was wise and timely that 5 years ago we did change that and provide options. And I agree, the fee in lieu of units is not is the worst option, and it's completely our discretion whether we would even entertain that. But it might be that there are units that are coming on that need to be funded, that have been figured out, permitted, and are ready to go, that might be an opportunistic option. So I wouldn't be closed off to it. I just say it's the developer's job to provide the most advantageous solution for the community and really for their project, for their owners and financiers.
Yeah. All right, thank you. I'll just quickly just say, if we find that we're in 40B compliance as of the 2020 census, I don't think that's an excuse to not take this opportunity, because 8 years from now, 9 years from now, we're going to be in the same boat again. We are every 10 years. We always seem to be at a delta of being about 25 units, give or take, short, and then we have to come up with some solution. But before I go to Amy, Deirdre, if you're real quick, I'll let you follow
Yeah,
up.
I'll be real quick. I want to, and I thank you, Clark, for the word creativity. That's what we're looking for here. I'm not tied to, absolutely has to be, but I also want to be cautious that something isn't presented to us that is not an appropriate site. It's not a place people can walk anywhere to. It's out on a highway. So creative with people who might have one car, may have no car. I'm open to it. That's all I want to say.
Okay, Amy.
Thank you. So I'd like to just remind us of what happened with the harbor project. So in the end, they purchased a building. I don't actually know what the negotiations were, but they basically took existing affordable housing and took it out of the public space and privatized it. And that's how they solved their problem. So we don't want that to be the mechanism by which we solve the problem. I think Tom's comment about it must do a net plus on the count. Otherwise, it doesn't count. Because we will never, we will always fall behind. And we will also send the signal that we don't really want people to move in town who can't buy a house and can't afford to live in Cohasset. And so I think that we really have to be a bit more strict with that. I also have to say, I guess, because I know I was unable to be at the meeting where the continuing discussion of 55 South Main occurred, but I guess everything else was solved and this is the last item, or are we still talking? Because I would like to talk about the parking situation and the actual ways in which that's actually going to operate.
No, everything is still on the table. That, that's why we were waiting for peer review comments, which are going to be far more covering a lot of subjects. I mean, for example, the issue of the height of the building isn't resolved yet either. And there's some other things that are not resolved, but we were deferring everything and we didn't get into it last time because we didn't have our peer review yet. So that's
Okay,
still
thank you.
all right,
I
Kevin.
didn't miss anything, even though that's great.
Yeah, so
I would add, the site's a 21E site, so there are issues with the environmental approach taken to date and what the future could possibly bring. And that hasn't entered into the discussion in any substantial matter at all. And we left the last discussion with that being an item and the applicants agreeing that their professionals would provide additional information on that.
Yeah.
With regard to the housing stock that this could bring, I think I just echo what has been previously said. I think the payments in lieu don't get us to where we need to be as a town. I think offsite location of inventory stock, while it may be more appealing for the numbers of the applicant from a business standpoint, from a financial standpoint, might be better to them. I don't think that fits the bill of what we're looking for as a community. You don't just package up things and move them conveniently to other parts of towns or communities and have the same effect, that incorporating them into an area that you're looking to make holistic for everyone in the town. I think, as Clark said, the applicant has to start looking at what their overall goal is here, and from a financial standpoint, find a way that it works, not just for them, but it's a net gain for the community with regard to the housing stock.
Thank you, Kevin. All right. Doug and George, I see you out there. Is there anything you'd like to add here? But, appreciate that the applicant is not here. So if it's some really substantive comments, I would hold them to our next meeting. I think we're continuing this till November 2nd. So unless you have something on this narrow topic that we're discussing, I think in fairness to the applicant, we'll leave you until November 2nd. If you're going to have anything, if you want to submit it in writing to the board ahead of time, that would be a big help to us. So, all right, who's in the Q&A here? All good for now. Thank you, George. And well, George, while you're there, let me ask you, the way you dealt with the affordable housing was not so much, if I understand it correctly, maybe you could just confirm this, and it's a creative idea, is not purchasing a property per se, but purchasing perpetual affordable rights. And I think that's what happened. And I think that's a creative way of doing it too, where an applicant is not put to the full cost of purchasing a property or building a property, but there are other solutions to ensure long-term affordability. Am I correct in summarizing how you did that?
Yes, I mean, to one of the other members' points earlier, that was a project that very easily was going to be converted to condominiums. So we were able to keep it and forever make it affordable. So I disagree with what was said earlier, that we took an affordable project and kept it affordable. We took a project that was likely going to be changed to for sale condominiums, and we permanently kept it as affordable. It's also the proximity. I think Deirdre had mentioned earlier, the proximity to downtown was important for us because there was a number of things on 3A we could have looked at, but we just felt that it wasn't fine. So the one that we picked on Cushing, which is a 2-minute walk to downtown, kind of met and checked a lot of the boxes off.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you.
I
So,
appreciate Mr. McGoldrick's comments, and I rescind what I said, and I was uninformed.
yeah, it's just a point that, to Clark's point, there are other creative solutions out there, other than just raw building of new units or purchasing properties. So thank you, George. Appreciate it. We'll see you at the next meeting. Sure. All right, Carolyn or Lauren, anything to add on this? Lauren, I think if you could summarize not only the housing comments, that was the specific, but you've heard a couple of other issues, and there are a lot of issues on this that are unresolved that our peer reviewer will take. But, mention the parking, mention the hazardous waste, mention the height, that are still issues that we expect them to address. But, on this housing issue, if there's anything that either one of you'd like to add, please do.
I have nothing further to add at this time. I've gotten a sufficient gist of what the board's sentiments are, so I feel comfortable to relay to the applicant what you'd be expecting for your next meeting.
Okay. Carolyn?
Nothing to add, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, well, that concludes our scheduled matters.
Oh, I'm sorry, you need to continue it
Oh, yeah,
Motion,
I'm sorry.
motion to continue to the 2nd of November,
at 6:30.
6:30.
Anybody second?
Second.
All right. Roll call, Clark,
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye.
Kevin Heine, aye.
Deirdre Hobson, aye.
Chris Plex, aye.
Thank you. All right, that concludes our scheduled matters. Couple of other things. Lauren, if you could just give us a preview of what we're looking at for the meeting on the 2nd.
Absolutely. So you have a continuation of a common drive application for 94 Black Horse Lane. 55 South Main Street will continue, and then we'll look at the decision language for Beechwood General Store as you just voted.
Okay. And I just want to say that I think we need to bring Black Horse Lane to a head. I'm not inclined to do any more continuances with that. The legal opinions have been flying around there for a while now. We haven't had a counter legal opinion. So I think we should bring that to a head. But if there's a request to continue it again, please bring it to my attention and Carolyn's attention, All right, next, Amy, I know you wanted to bring up an issue tonight. You can lower your hand, by the way, it's been up all night, so. I know you wanted to bring up an issue, so I'll let you do that right now.
Thank you. I attended the meeting on Monday, and I would like to talk about what we learned, and also from a strategic perspective, what we didn't see. And so we know that what we're attempting to do is a significant change in the zoning bylaw. And we also know that the attendance at that meeting was very specific and was very low, in my opinion. And I wouldn't say that that has anything to do with the effort of anyone trying to make it work, but maybe that the way we're trying to do it will have to be considered in light of the fact that we've got 2,000 people that could show up at a meeting when we finally get this all put together, and we haven't had anything but 50, 60 people total of the town who have attended. I sense that we might, I was a bit surprised to not really know much about what was going to happen. And I felt like the amount of information that was provided was a sort of call and repeat. Somebody asked a question and then they got an answer, but they didn't get a big picture of what was taking place. So it's entirely possible that the meeting I missed designed a system and I didn't see it, but I'm concerned that we have to figure out a way to get much greater public engagement for doing something that we're proposing to do.
All right. Well, let me say, and I was going to report on the meeting, and my report would be that I think it went rather well based on what it was intended to do. We had, between Zoom and live attendance, 88 people. And we had active questions coming from both sources. Who knows who saw it on television? Who knows who will still see it on television when it's repeated? The bylaw committee is doing this and in charge of this, and we've gone over quite a bit and talked about for a long time public forums, and we're always envisioning the same types of forums of gathering community input, as the master plan did and the harbor plan and all the other plans that have been done in the last 5 years. It was not intended to show any specific proposals. It was intended to highlight issues that the committee over the last 2 years has talked about and has identified, and to try to identify other issues. It was completely designed to get feedback from the community. And frankly, I found a lot of helpful feedback from the community. I thought about taking a straw poll on certain questions, but didn't do that. But again, that would have been, 50 people in that room giving me a straw poll would be useless. But I certainly got a lot of sentiment from the community, some of which is realistic, some of which is completely unrealistic. But that's a good thing to know too. But with all due respect, leave it to the bylaw committee to do this. I mean, we have young go-getter Jason Schreier, our community relations director, who's gone crazy in the last month to get publicity and stuff out there. Frankly, 88 people coming to something where there wasn't definitive decisions to be made, that wasn't a town meeting or a board hearing for a permit, is actually quite good for Cohasset. It's surprisingly good for Cohasset to get people out on a night and to get 58 people to show up live at this point, since everybody's so used to Zoom. So, I mean, I think it was good, but, the bylaw committee on our next meeting, which is next Wednesday, the 26th, we are going to, debrief ourselves on what happened, what we might change, what we could do better. It was horrible that the microphone that was there didn't work until later. Pastor Karen showed up with a microphone. Little logistical things like that, but I think it achieved the objective that we were trying to do, which is simply get feedback from the community and input on what they're thinking. Everybody for the last few months.
Tom, I would add, in terms of a toe in the water for addressing change, I thought it made it was a good introduction to what's ahead in terms of zoning. Maybe I'll call it reform for the town of Cohasset. I mean, the reality is at the harbor, there's really only two properties that could produce some change. It's the marina and then the boatyard. Those are the only ones that haven't been major properties that have the potential for something development, if you want to call it that.
Is it worth touching on what the lightning rod issues were? It seems like.
Well, they really weren't. But I mean, I'd like to suggest that perhaps a forum where we use a panel might be better than Tom going on and on about his thoughts in terms of engagement and having back and forth dialogue. I mean, I can certainly, I think if we have a panel, then we can all present slightly different facts and opinions that I think is more engaging to the public.
All right, the next forum is going to have a wider participation than just me because it's going to be housing focused. And just for the benefit of the rest of the board, that originally these forums were envisioned perhaps of going through all of the proposed changes in the bylaws section by section. And then we changed that focus to doing specific topics. And we have 3 focused forums for this year. We're going to have more because the bylaw itself is going to be presented to town meeting in 2 parts. I can tell you that one of the forums in late winter is going to be about the articles that would be brought forward for the spring 23 town meeting in a non-town meeting setting so that we can have a more robust, open discussion and some feedback that we might make changes from before we go into the formal planning board hearing and town meeting process. But none of this was intended to just say, here's what we want to do. What do you think? That's what town meeting is going to be about. But let me suggest this: is if you got specific comments about how it should be done or changes it, tune into our. Clark will be at our meeting on the 26th. The rest of you tune in, or submit it in writing to us so that we have some feedback to work with. But our next forum is the 7th, so it's coming up quick, and we're going to deal with housing issues, mostly multifamily housing issues. Well, I said mostly, exclusively. We're not going to deal with the single family issues.
I mean, Tom makes a good suggestion. It is the planning board's responsibility to run zoning bylaw changes up the flagpole. So it's really all our responsibility.
That's fine. Yeah, I know.
While Tom may be the point of the spear and the zoning bylaw committee, secondarily, it's a big role for the board as a whole and responsibility.
It is, and that's why there's 2 of us who are represented. 2 of us sitting on the zoning bylaw committee. It's because the central role of our board is recognized by everyone. So yeah, who just said Chris? I'm sorry. Yeah,
you had said it would be great to have some feedback. Can you point us to what it is we should be providing feedback on?
Well, if you, I mean, in the manner in which again, the forum's objective was to try to just really solicit community feedback or questions, comments, concerns, and I think we did. We heard about parking. We heard about, let's not let the village ever change. We heard quite a bit about height and the potential height in the village, which no one up to now has ever discussed other than in the harbor, changing the 35-foot height limit, but that came up quite a bit. We heard a lot of different things, but if what Clark is suggesting, not a bad idea, if we approach it differently as we move on.
But it's really
the format of it, that's great.
Not necessarily getting feedback on specific stuff, but it's people being engaged, I think is what the critical thing that came out of Monday night's meeting.
And just
dealing with change in the future. And
one more comment, and then I'll shut up. And that is, if you want feedback, we need to be specific on what issues we're seeking feedback on. And I think the postcard that went around helps to do that. But I think the more specific we can be about saying things like, what do you think about increasing or changing the maximum height of buildings in Cohasset. The more we do that, the more I think we're going to get people coming out of the woodwork, maybe on both sides of an
Yeah.
issue, saying what they think.
I'm
I'm just confused about what it is we're providing feedback on.
Right, well, again, that was, the idea was then when we decided to start the forums was to do them focused on particular issues. So Harbor and Village was this one. The next one is about housing. And we're gonna have the Affordable Housing Committee presenting about the housing production plan and how that fits into what zoning changes we might need to achieve objectives of that plan. Woody Chittick's gonna speak about our existing accessory dwelling bylaw that is, largely unused and why it's unused. And then we're going to talk about what the MBTA mandate is on us and whether that's something we should need to be concerned about or not.
The
But we have to seat
multi-housing,
people with that. So
MBTA.
accessory dwelling bylaw, nobody's going to know. But if you say low income housing near the train station,
All right.
you're going to get some
Well,
people engaging.
Yeah, no, all right. So in the promotional materials of telling what the next two forums will be about, we can probably be a little bit more specific than we were. Although the materials with the outline of our discussion points was there for this one, maybe we can do a better job with that. And just so you know, the December one is about environmental issues. So I believe we're engaging Amy's husband to talk about climate change and resiliency, and there is a model bylaw out circulating about. Clark is going to present on low impact and sustainable development. And then, with respect to our current bylaws, we may discuss, the ledge removal and clearing bylaw, the way they got passed, the way they were originally proposed. And, we don't have much of a track record with either one of those yet to know whether we need to make any changes, but we'll at least bring up the topic. And then I think as we move on into next year, and as we approach each town meeting, and we have specific bylaws that we want to bring forward, I think, the format of how we engage the public in those might be very different. And the roundtable idea or the panel discussion idea may be very good. It may be, because it'll be, that kind of forum will be more like town meeting. Here is a specific proposal. What do you think about it? But any suggestions you have to change it, and if you didn't see it, it's going to be repeated, I guess, on cable quite a bit. So,
Can I just make one administrative comment? And forgive me if I missed it, but I had quite a number of people say to me, they could not find the Zoom link anywhere. So they couldn't get on Zoom. They had questions, they had comments. I don't know, like 143 has a link right now on the harbor bylaw that we're trying to get dealt with. There's a link so you can click right in. Maybe we can put it right in, Cohasset 143 where you could click and watch, because that's what I did. I clicked and watched the whole meeting the other night, but I couldn't find the link, and maybe it was my own stupidity, but
no, it's good to hear.
Really public about that.
No, that's good to hear that. I think that, Lauren, correct me if I'm wrong, that Jason put that on the zoning bylaw committee's page of the town website. And that page, admittedly, is quite new, and probably a lot of people don't know that it even exists. And I don't know, I personally, I don't know how we directed people to go to that link. I don't recall from the flyers and everything, but Lauren, if you make a note of that, we'll just take a look at that for the next time. And maybe the link has to be right on the front page of the town website rather than searching for the bylaw committee's particular page.
Right, we put it on the town meeting calendar as well, like where agendas are located, but we can work on better improvements for next time.
Don't know where to go look, so they just wind up going town of Cohasset, and then there's nothing there, so they give up. So,
Yeah.
So I think I'm the next person to talk. I've been watching the game here. And I think we're not using our human resources to the best of our ability. And I also think that we need some advice about how to be successful in passing a bylaw that has not been changed in 40 years. Because we already know what our experience has been in the last couple of years with the attempt to evolve. And having presentations at the Wilcott Garden is a great idea. The problem is that the only way it's going to really have an impact is if we have 500 people. So it's like a scale problem that if we don't address it now, and we think that we can do it incrementally, and we don't think about it strategically, I fear that we will find ourselves at the same point we were at public hearings or at the town meetings, when very few voices basically drowned out what the work we did. And I would say you've got professionals on the board who speak and practice for a living of all different kinds. And we should utilize those resources and be strategic about it, but not do it. I think that I believe that, just a minute, I believe the zoning bylaw is responsible to the planning board. Is that correct?
No, the bylaw committee is answering to the select board.
Okay, it is, that's
All
right.
right, and no disrespect, but we have, the reason the committee was set up and the working group before it is because we don't have the bandwidth in this committee, in our board, with the times of other things we do to handle all of it. And we set up a special committee for this, and we've done that in all kinds of things in this town. I'm well aware of the responsibilities of this board, and Clark and I are there to exercise the,
It's true, but if we, the board members, don't know what you're doing,
well,
and then somebody asks us, Tom, wait a minute, I think my concern is legitimate. If we don't have minutes, if we don't know what's happening, and then we are the conduits for information to the public, we're not going to have anything to say.
Let me say this. At every meeting for most of the last 2 years, I have tried to update this committee about what the bylaw working group and now the bylaw committee is doing. I probably was going to do that tonight, except really all there is to report on at the moment is the results of the forum. Our minutes, we have minutes. I generate them as soon as the meeting is over, and they're there. I can't spoon feed everybody on this committee. We have 2 representatives. You are welcome to come to our meetings, participate in the meetings, comment on the meetings without, to the point of not prejudicing your votes later on when we have to actually vote on bylaws. What else do you want me to do? And as far as the attendance at these forums, if you think we are ever going to get a meeting in this town that isn't town meeting, we can't get 500 people at a town meeting. We are not getting 500 people for anything that's not a town meeting. That's completely unrealistic. Wilcott Commons is picked because it's one of the few facilities, I think we have 2 in town, the other one's in the high school, in the library, that can do the hybrid meeting of live and Zoom and television.
But I think the sentiment of public
And that's the way we're doing
engagement
it.
is completely right on the money that Amy's articulating. And just as a reminder, I still think that the planning board does have a primary role in having the public hearings for the zoning bylaw changes. The only problem is that, I mean, in what we would anticipate is those bylaw changes would already be baked into the system when we see them. But that doesn't mean we can't have robust discussions on what makes sense and how they interrelate and how people deal with change and just exactly what the word crafting is.
I don't disagree.
I think
I don't disagree at all. But then if we have, and particularly on a night when we have a long meeting with hearings, we can't start rolling our eyes at 8:30, 9 o'clock and not want to listen to a zoning bylaw committee update that either you or I present. So, I mean, if you want the information, I'm glad to provide the information. You're glad to provide the information, but we got to pay attention to the information. And I will express my frustration of the last 2 years that we get to the late at a meeting and everybody says, oh, let's go home, let's go home. I don't want to hear this. Well, we're going to have to hear it. And we're, we're moving on an aggressive schedule, and I'm glad to keep you all up. And like I said, you're welcome to every meeting we have. Yes, Chris.
Kevin's had his hand up for.
Oh yeah, I know, Kevin. I'm sorry. I apologize, Kevin.
No, that's fine. I appreciate the discussion on this. I think the postcard was a great first step. I think it was a good tool, and I think it should be maintained, but I think it does need more specificity. You know, for instance, 143 TV, I didn't know I needed .org, and then when I got to .org, I needed to click on watch live to actually watch live. I couldn't find a Zoom link. I went to the town, I went to the agenda, and I couldn't find a link there. I didn't know where to look. And I suspect, even given, I think, what is a positive number of attendees, Tom, that you recite? I think that's a really good first meeting on this. Now, the question is whether that maintains or goes down or goes up. We don't know. But for a town of this size, speaking from someone that has to put forward public meetings in my professional capacity, you know, sometimes you're lucky if you get one person there. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that would be the case in a town engaged as ours, but I think this is a good first step. But we definitely need more specificity. To Chris's point about, okay, here are the topics, and then, you know, what's of interest to the people on here. Yeah, there's only so much you can fit into a postcard, but that's the work of the professionals to see what works and grabs people and that they can use, so that if they do click on Scan Me, it provides the link that they can zoom in on to participate. So, I think, Tom, your role as the chair here, leading this forward, is critical to this. You know, as the chair of this board and with the interest of this board in the town, I think it's in your purview to move forward with this and spearhead this. This is a tough thing to move forward and change bylaws. And we all know how you get to town meeting and someone stands up and says, well, I didn't know that was the case. Part of the benefit of having meetings like this, engaging the public ahead of time, is it provides the appropriate discussion before town meeting, so that when someone says, I didn't know, or that's not what this was supposed to be, there's a way to correct them right there in the public forum as to how it really does go down. And you can't feign ignorance. So great first step, Tom. Keep it up. I think you've got
I
my
thank you.
support on this and others here.
I thank you, and you know, that is the objective, to get this out to the public. My own view of this is we are not going to be completely 100% prepared for the opposition at the town meeting, and surprisingly, at this forum, unless they were listening on television or on Zoom and they didn't identify themselves, you know, some of the usual, quote unquote, usual suspects, or some out of town, in-town property owners, but out of town developers have spoken at town meeting that I anticipated might be there, weren't. And so, yes, there may be still opposition that we'll see for the first time at town meeting. Nothing we can do about that. But what the forums are designed to do is to try to flesh out the issues we may hear and try to anticipate them and try to have answers for what we're going to do. And again, as we go forward and we get into more specifics, I think maybe we take a different approach on how we go to the public. But our intent is not to just show up at town meeting or at this board's Section 5 hearings as being the first unveiling of actual bylaw text. The public will see that before that, both of those events happen. I hope Lauren's taking notes about the publicity thing. And yeah, maybe the postcard, I didn't get the postcard, surprisingly, it never came to my house, but perhaps also making clear what we are anticipating and expecting from the public at these forums, because I don't think the public probably knew what to expect or what to do. And, you know, when we first asked for questions, there was a silence in the room, which is typical, that no one wants to be the first person to say something.
That's not a problem.
We had a volunteer from Zoom who kicked everything off. And then once that happened and one question got out there, everybody in the room got more engaged. But you know, I'm interested to hear about these things about the outreach, because there was another person who told me that she too did not think, she goes, I know you're doing things and I know there's publicity, but I'm not hearing as much about it as I thought I would. So that's good feedback for us to come back to. This was obviously going to be the first test case, and you know, we'll try to approve it for the next two. But you know, the December one's going to be, yeah, go ahead.
just one quick point, and I would say, you know, I probably brought a couple of dozen zoning bylaw changes or new zoning bylaw changes to the floor of town meeting for passage. And ultimately, I really feel that, you know, if we've done our homework, that and had a thorough process leading up to town meeting, that we can have success making these reforms and improvements to our zoning bylaw, modernizing and upgrading. But it's not without a lot of pain. I mean, I think the change is difficult for people to get a handle on, and we really need to expose exactly what we propose to change and model what those changes might be, so that people really understand in the form that we did in the process leading up to changing the village bylaw. So that people are engaged, they understand, their fears are addressed, and that we're crystal clear about what we think the potential impacts of the changes are. Not that we know everything, because we don't. There are always unintended consequences of
Don't use that
changes that
phrase
you
anymore.
just can't you know.
Well, I
change-
said that the other
change
night.
in zoning
Yeah, we're never
bylaws
going to write a perfect bylaw.
puts
Yeah.
but change puts value
You guys have you
in
both
one
have
person's
punch lists
pocket.
of headaches in the bylaws, right?
I'm sorry?
I assume Tom and Clark, you both have a mental punch list of these are the things in the bylaw that are a headache. That, boy, I wish we could do something about these.
Well, all right, yeah, so the bylaw working group for its year and a half of existence was heavy on research. Yes, I threw out a draft of text, but we didn't delve into text much at all. We were heavy on research and on various changes that might be proposed, which those kinds of substantive changes are probably targets for the fall town meeting next year, not the spring. Spring is going to focus on reorganization and the cleanup of the mess that the bylaw is.
Where I'm going with this is
we did a lot of research. There are other topics.
Tom, let Chris make his point.
Yeah, go ahead.
if you were to publish that list in plain English, not legalese, you know, top 10 aggressively de-worded so somebody could scan it as they're walking back from their mailbox, there are probably things in there that other people in town have said, yeah, that's frustrating.
Okay.
That's what the bylaw currently says.
That's a fair comment about our approach, because
And you've been through it more than anybody.
Well,
I
no,
assume,
and I
but-
want this gives me an opportunity to bring up where the bylaw committee is as of our last meeting. We are meeting twice a month now. Carolyn's firm has provided a diagnostic at the end of September.
Can we distribute that to the planning board?
We can. We went through the entire bylaw, Judge Cutler. Great comments at a microscopic level that even I haven't done. On the bylaw working group, Woody, myself, Katie, from our experience of dealing with this, we've had maybe a more macro view of where there's some problems and where changes are needed. And, you know, we are now starting, and we started at our last meeting, to actually get into text. And we are beginning to work through that, but again, going more reorganizational first and major substance. And when I say major substance, we're probably looking at, you know, the table of dimensional regulations, area regulations, where we deal with frontage, setbacks, height, house size, lot coverage, that kind of thing. Those kinds of changes are targeted for the fall. There are ideas we have discussed. We have yet to come to a consensus on any of them. And on one particular issue, we would need further study to understand the impacts of either staying the way we are or changing. And so that there is some more study that we need to do. But we haven't gotten to that point yet, but we are moving along quite aggressively on we have the diagnostic, great tool. I wouldn't have had the time to do it. Nobody on the committee would have had the time to do it. We're starting to work with that. with our own internal proposals on changes in language, and we're starting to write the language. And again, we will have something for the spring, which is more organizational type stuff and the substance later. But, you know, can we at some point point to an outline of what we're doing, what we're thinking about? Yeah. And again, everything we reveal, of course, somebody can submit an application to beat the potential change, and there's nothing we can do about that. We can't keep this all secret. So I'll bring that up to the committee. Clark and I are making mental notes now of, you know, what kind of additional outreach or you know, what we reveal, where our thinking is. But you know, again, the working group and the bylaw committee itself is only a couple months old. The working group before that, we did not, other than the organization part, the reorganization, we hadn't reached a lot of consensus yet on substance. So we weren't even quite there yet, but we will get there. We certainly know what issues we're looking at, and we can identify them.
I think that's where your engagement is going to come from, is if our new communication professional can take the issues from the bylaw and your and Clark's and Woody's ideas about them and put it into one line on the postcard that somebody can scan, say, yeah, I'm interested in that. Because what was on the postcard,
all right,
Not enough.
you know,
all right, we'll think about how we can do that better. So I'll just a quick again, the December forum is, we're hoping to engage Amy's husband as a lead speaker on the climate and resiliency, then some of these other things. That one, we're trying to schedule that early December to avoid the Christmas issues, but you know, we may not get as big attendance on that one, but there's not a lot we can do about that. But you know, I think the other night was a fairly good turnout. And considering if we didn't do a great job on publicity on what was being discussed, I think it was an even better turnout. But
I think it was better publicity than most of these things get. So
yeah.
I don't want my feedback to be perceived as criticism. I think you got a remarkable turnout.
You got to think thick skin about all of this stuff. So, all right. So again, if you want to clue into, Lauren's left, but we'll see that KP's diagnostic is distributed to you all. It's 30-something pages. It gets into excruciating detail, but it's good stuff because it really highlights a lot of conflicts, language issues we have in the existing bylaw. That's the result of grafting so much stuff on it over the years. But and it's the basis, that and our own internal proposals are the basis for our discussions going forward. And you know, you who are not on the bylaw committee, you know, obviously your comments at any time are welcome. I can tell you there are members of other committees who are not on the bylaw committee who are submitting material to us and submitting comments and on different things that we're doing. So the 26th is our next meeting. We'll debrief this meeting. We'll do a preview of how we're looking at the November 7th housing forum. And we are going to continue our work on the administration related articles. And if we're super ambitious in time, we might start discussing definitions. But we're moving ahead with all of that. So, and you're welcome to participate in any way you see fit. We did try to solicit 2 more members the other night. The committee has only got 5 members. We're entitled to 7. We can't have any more planning board members as an official member, but you're certainly welcome to participate. Our door is open and has been open to anybody participating at the meetings. So. All right. Anything else that anybody'd like to discuss? Lauren's not here. I don't know if we have any minutes to approve. I don't think we do. Carolyn's gone. Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Yep.
Second.
All right. Roll call.
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
That's my eye.
Kevin Heine, aye.
Deirdre Hobson, aye.
Chris Plex, aye.
Okay. Thank you all. We'll see you on the 2nd, if not next Wednesday.
Good night. Lucy said, "That's my teacher."
Okay, great. All right. Good night all. Thank you.
Bye-bye.